Hey YouTube. Tonight I'm laughing at myself because this video is could be potentially very hilarious. Number one, because I still don't know how to do editing software, so there's gonna be no stopping of this video when I make a fool out of myself. We're just gonna go right through and see how it goes. And in the future, hopefully I'll just, pick up the skills of editing software and whatnot. But that way it'll be less excruciating for you. But I just figure I gotta go for it and then learn along the way, like being thrown in the deep end. So what I figured my first video would be something that I feel like is relevant for now. And one of the things that really kicked it off for me as to like why this might be important to do is because I had a client who in my private practice, she's in her 30s and she's the sweetest girl. Very smart, actually. I won't even give any details, but long story short is that she's very smart, and yet she felt like she did not have the capacity to talk about politics because she felt like if she did, she would sound dumb because she didn't even really know the basics of it. And so I want to just do a video on my understanding of the current basics between the left and the right. And I feel like I can do this because, like I said, I am right now very bipartisan. I can see the pros and the cons of both sides. I really don't feel like I feel like I have a foot in both sides, to be honest. I have been in actually both camps before, and but I honestly, I will never be in politics as a politician. That's not happening. But I feel like it's a very important thing for all of us to be aware of politics in a way that doesn't make it intimidating. I think the system has designed it to be intimidating on purpose. And so I feel like we need to take that back and make it very practical and easy for people to be involved as an active citizen. And so one of the things that I wanted to just go over tonight is what I see as the difference between classic left and right, or at least like left and right now, because that's my alarm. Let me turn that off. See, I'm not even gonna start over because this is what makes videos fun. Hold on one second. Make sure that's off. Okay. So one of the things that I feel like, of course, over the course of time in our country, the pendulum between left and right swings back and forth. Number one, I think that's a great thing because it really does seem to, I know Ruth Bader Ginsburg said that she thought that was the biggest tool that we had for our country was the pendulum, because it seemed to always balance everything out. And that was one real strength that we had as a country, is that it seemed to be able to keep everything in check. And I love that when she said that. That was actually, she said, I think, one of her favorite things about this country. But what I wanted to say is the definition of left and right does change and has changed over time, throughout the hundreds of years. I have a hair there, I think, lovely. Living with cats, so fun. Has changed over time. So, certain issues that may have been at one point left or may have been one point right have switched over time. I don't have an example offhand, but I'm sure you guys do. Again, this video is going to be not for people who are politically advanced. And I don't mean to say that like in a condescending way for the people who are going to watch it, but this video will be for people who are too afraid to enter into conversations because they feel too intimidated by just the basics of understanding. I remember when I was in a political science class in college, I walked away from that class because he used such weird terms. I still didn't really understand it. I was kind of like, I think I could write a paper maybe on some of that. But if I feel like putting some of these things in like commonplace terms would make it less intimidating for people. I'm gonna adjust this real quick. Okay, so let's kind of get into it and pull this. I took some notes over here. So one of the things that makes me very easy to understand the difference between what I would call like conservative versus liberal classically is if you think about answering the question, how much do you want the government to be involved? The conservative group, which is the right, classically has wanted the government to be involved a conservative amount. So meaning, whereas like the liberal or the left want the government to be involved a liberal amount, right? So that to me kind of always makes me go ding, like that's an easy way to remember a lot of the differences that end up when you see. Now you'll see later on, and I'm not going to cover everything tonight, you'll see I'm just kind of covering the basics, but we'll get into, I'll do some more videos along the way because there's a lot of it's kind of hilarious to me. There's definitely some hypocrisy on both sides as to you know, what that means. Like some issues they would, you know, for instance, like, you know, the right would rather have the government be more involved, or the left would rather have the government be less involved. So like, I do think it's interesting how they kind of selectively say that, but in general, the whole point of, you know, the conservative side is for the government to be involved a conservative amount or as little as possible, whereas the liberal side or the left is more okay with the government being involved a liberal amount. So, and the point of this, and again, I'm just speaking in general terms from my understanding of conversations with both sides. So this is not, I mean, and again, it is my own personal opinion. So I know I could be corrected 1,000 ways, you know, everyone sees politics differently. So if there's one thing you take away from this conversation, is that the way that I define things is going to be like, you know, there's 360 million people in this country right now. There's going to be 360 million different definitions of what is the right and the left, right? So, okay, in general, because the left is more, quote, liberal with how they want the government to be involved, they're often more okay with the government being into social programs. They are more okay with paying more taxes because of that, because so they're okay with giving liberally in their a little bit more in their paycheck to go for the social good. And whereas, and I'm just going to kind of go topic by topic. So whereas the conservative group would rather, for instance, be more conservative in their paychecks and in their taxes and have the government be involved in less social programs. Now, again, this is just generally because you will have people who are economically conservative, but they call themselves economically conservative, but then socially liberal. So that's like a whole different side. But I'm speaking in generalities. So again, conservatives will say, take less out of my paycheck because I want the government to be less involved. And their theory over here is, and you know, again, I'm trying to do this as like objectively as possible, but over here on the conservative side, they say our country should be a meritocracy. So, you know, if you basically, like, everyone should get paid according to what they contribute to society and what we are able to contribute to society. So the harder you work, the more you earn, the more you should get back. And, you know, now the liberal side of things will say, hey, that's great. But in reality, we have people who are disabled or, you know, end up in a car accident and can't pay. And so what do we do for them? And so now, again, on that debate, the conservative side would say, now, again, you're going to get a million different answers, but you'll get some saying, hey, I'm fine with paying, you know, some things to government programs, but then I'll also say we feel like the good that should be done in the world should be done privately. So like either out of my own pocket, you know, or from churches, and have us, you know, have churches be doing more good, or, but basically like the good should not be done from the government. It should be done from our own private. We end up saving that more money from our paychecks. So we'll have more money to do good for people in our private lives. Whereas then, again, the liberal people will say, well, that's great, but it's, you know, we're leaving people high and dry and not being able to eat or whatever. So that theory is not working. Now, again, I'm kind of just going back and forth here, but the liberals will say, well, see, that's why we should do Medicare, Medicaid, you know, like, and I agree with that. However, what conservatives will say is like, well, the more money that we end up giving to these big programs, it ends up making the government bigger with not enough accountability. And we end up with institutions that are massively big with no oversight. So the more money we give, the more powerful we make the government, and there is no current system of oversight that is effective. Now, of course, Congress should be, the judicial system, should be, the president should be, but right now we are living in a system where a lot of those are bought by corporations, so that's a whole different show. I'm not even gonna get into that. But, I think that the conservatives do have a point in saying we don't have enough accountability in those big, governments, right, in the big government programs right now to keep giving money just without asking questions, right? So we do need to come up with better forms of checks and balances for those. And they'll commonly give the example of the DMV, right? So and the DMV is a very good example because we all know the experience absolutely sucks for everyone all the time. The hours are nothing. It's always a excruciating experience. I'm sorry to DMV workers, but sorry, not sorry. So, it just seems like they're just like, how little can we possibly do while still keeping our doors open? I think everybody has that experience. It's horrific. There's no competition. There's seemingly no accountability. It's gotten, in the last 20 years that I've seen, it's gotten worse and worse and worse. So then liberal sides will say, hey, yeah, you have the DMV, but then you also have the fire department. So, the fire department's excellent and we chip in for that. That's an example of it being done well. So I think that the point is there's just this constant balance between how much should we give the government to do, social good, and where's the accountability for that, right? Okay, so that's just one thing. But the major question a lot of times is, how much do you want the government to be involved in your life? And of course, I think a lot of people would say as little as possible while also taking care of everybody, right? And maybe no, I take it back because I don't think libertarians, I don't know how much they would say while taking care of everybody. I think they would say let everybody take care of each other privately. And I'm not saying that to insult them because I think this is where I say I think everybody has the same values. I think in this country, everybody wants to take care of each other. I really do believe that. After 25 or 20 years of doing therapy, I said the other night 25 years, I meant 20 years of doing therapy. And what I really do believe is people care about each other. They just have different theories about what is the best way to take care of each other. What is the most efficient, practical, non-wasteful, efficient is a big one because bureaucracy is, the waste of all the paperwork and systems and things like that is, a big complaint. But again, yeah, the reality is a lot of people who cannot help themselves through meritocracy do need help from somewhere. So this is just, again, I'm on no side here. These are just the questions and kind of the major debate going back and forth. So currently, obviously, the left are the Democrats and the right are Republicans. And so let's see. Other issues are classically the left and Democrats have been against or for gun control, whereas typically conservatives have been for your Second Amendment rights, for keeping your the ability to defend yourself with a gun. So that's another difference. And so the left, because it's quote liberal, a lot of times it does have a tendency to include more of the minority groups because the minority are more the systemically oppressed in our population. And again, if it's a meritocracy, if you think about it, the people who have less natural merit, if you will. I mean, I won't say natural merit because human beings all have the same merit, but like, you know, if people are systemically oppressed, they're not going to necessarily have the same capacity to, or they're not going to feel like they have the same capacity either to go make the same amount of money as someone else who is not systemically oppressed. So a lot of times they will go towards the party that is interested in giving or supporting people who are just more like, what if something should happen to me, you know? So, okay. I'm gonna leave that one, but the reason why I say that is because minority rights and immigration. So like, for instance, the right is classically more for stricter immigration policies, and then the left is a little bit looser, but it just depends on the politician, depends on, you know, each of their immigration stances. So classically the left and liberals are more for being pro-choice, whereas, you know, the rights and conservatives are classic, you know, pro-life stance. And again, I won't get into all this. This is like, seems very like common sense to some people, but again, I've had clients who are afraid to have conversations about politics because they don't even know the basics. So, you know, I really think there are some people out there who literally just say, I'm only for, you know, I'm just a conservative because I don't want to pay more of my taxes, you know? And it's like, I don't think that's not representative of what a lot of people are, you know, if they are conservative or if they're liberal. It's not just a taxes issue, and I don't mean to demean that stance, but it's like, I think it is more complicated than that. A lot of times it boils down to like government, you know, accountability. Also, you know, how much have you seen people live a life where they are not fully taken care of, and the system does not work for them. So like, you know, a lot of people on the left, they have seen a lot in reality where the system and people working very hard still do not have a great life. Whereas maybe like over here, people working very hard seem to live a life that is good enough, you know? So I'm generalizing, of course, but this is just what I have seen through the conversations I have had. So again, the left and liberals are a little more okay with tax increases, whereas conservatives and Republicans, you know, favor for sure tax decreases. And then let's see, I'm trying to think of anything else that needs to be stated right now. I think that really that's about it. I think that what a lot of times, you know, it's just about theory and reality. You know, I am not a communist, but you know, you could be something in theory, but know that it might not work in reality. So like, you know, maybe there's a lot of conservatives who started out thinking we should be very generous, and then over time they see, you know what, there is a lot of corruption in the government, and I don't want to keep giving my paycheck to systems that are really inefficient, you know. Or maybe there's, you know, liberals who started off as conservatives and then just saw a lot of people like fall by the wayside, and so then they said, you know what, I would rather give a little bit more of my paycheck, and I want to see like stronger Medicaid. Or maybe they lost their health care. And that's a big one. Like, you know, a lot of people who want, who are liberal are these days gaining support for the liberal side of things because they need government health care. Because I know so many clients who literally could not afford healthcare anymore and had to get the government healthcare. So my point is, you know, that is a very basic understanding of left versus right. But I wanted to do it because it needs to be put in common terms. You know, and then I won't even get into like the whole democratic process, you know, but it just needs to be said for people who feel intimidated. It broke my heart when my client said that she truly felt like she couldn't even have a conversation with her loved one, her boyfriend, because she felt stupid. And I just felt like we need to be making more videos that are common, like just basic common words, you know, kind of just to break down basic concepts before we start getting into, you know, because a lot of these political pundits and whatnot use big words in their arguments to sound smarter and win the argument, and they get so mad, and a lot of people don't want to tune in and hear anger, you know. So that is my first video, and God knows I don't want to spend all of my videos at all on politics because it's not fun. It's not like the funnest, you know, video. I would rather, there's a lot of other fun ones, and like I said, in the future I definitely want to get more into interviews, but we're just starting off with monologues. So this is my, you know, one of my first ones that I just felt passionate about trying to get out there for people. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you're having a good night wherever you are, and take care of yourself.